part 3 to why are wigs so expensive. Now I'm going to talk about why some wigs are not so expensive. Why is it that some places have wigs for only $800, and if you go on whatever, AliExpress, Amazon, eBay, you can even find some human hair wigs for as little as $300, $200. What's up with that? Well, not everything that claims to be human hair actually is human hair. So if you buy one of those wigs, always test it first before you wash it, before you rip the tag off, and check the return policy before you buy it. Like, make sure and check the reviews also. That's super important. If it seems too good to be true, probably is. And human hair at that price is too good to be true, because I'm telling you this as a manufacturer. If I were to buy, okay, I am getting better quality hair, but if I were to buy a bundle of wefts, like just the wefts, like if I were to buy, let's say I wanted to add some hair to this, and I wanted to buy just a few wefts to add, it would cost me $300 just to get a few wefts of this quality, just for a couple of wefts straight from China of European hair. So yes, it's a very different quality. If I were getting raw hair, I could get more of the raw hair that's not made into wefts already for $300, but still, it's not a lot of hair. So a whole wig for $300, even if it's cheaper quality hair. Read the reviews and check the return policy. As for how you test it, use a curling iron or a flat iron if it's a curly wig. See how it curls or straightens, because if it's synthetic hair, if it's not heat resistant, it's going to melt when you go to curl, and sometimes it can be a blend of synthetic and human, so maybe some of it would melt. Hopefully your curling iron or flat iron is ceramic non-stick. I like ceramic anyway, but if it's ceramic, it'll be non-stick, so when the hair melts onto it, it'll wipe off easily and not ruin it. But if it curls right up or straightens right up, then at least you're dealing with human hair. If it melts right away, that's fake. If it just doesn't do anything but it doesn't melt, it's heat resistant synthetic hair. If it curls, it'll probably have a really funky smell. It's probably very processed, cheap human hair that has a lot of chemicals on it. So that would account for the funky smell. When you're dealing with that price level, often it is dyed with fabric dye and not hair dye. Fabric dye is cheaper than hair dye, so that really damages the hair. Also, the results are not so color fast, so when you go to wash it in the sink, expect some of the color to bleed out into the water, so just be prepared for that. Another thing you should know about hair that's that cheap, and cheaper hair in general, there is no way it's ethically sourced and it's that cheap. Now, what I mean by that, people imagine different things when they hear ethically sourced, and maybe they're thinking like someone taking advantage of poorer women by offering them a cheap price for their hair, and that's what it means by it's unethically sourced, that they took advantage of the fact that she was poor because she wouldn't have sold it if she wasn't so poor. It's much worse than that. I mean, gangs of people gangs of men going, the wig market is huge. It's huge. There are specific communities that wear wigs, and people within those communities often think that it's just their community that wears wigs, or that their community is the main community that wears wigs. But that's not true. Wigs are everywhere. When you learn how to recognize them, when you're an expert in wigs and you know how to recognize them, they're everywhere. The African American community thinks that they're the main wig wearers of the world. It's not true. The Jewish community thinks that they're the main wig wearers of the world. It's not true. The alopecia community thinks that they're the main wig wearers of the world. It's not true. Wigs are everywhere. So many of us wear wigs for so many reasons. So the hair market is huge, and it's not just wigs, it's also hair extensions, it's toppers, it's toupees. There's so many things. The hair market is huge, and it's expensive, and it's a consumable, because a well-made wig can last years, yes, but what about one that isn't as well made? What about one that, if it's glued to the head or sewn to the head, it doesn't last as long? If it's more cheaply made and it only lasts a few months. So they need to be replaced pretty often. Most of the wigs in the world are cheaper, and they get replaced more often. So the wig market is huge, and it's a big consumable. So in certain parts of the world where poorer or more vulnerable people don't have a lot of rights, it's a huge market, and it's very easy for them to be taken advantage of. So there could be a bunch of young girls sitting in a classroom, and this happens in China. One vendor proudly bragged to me about it, that, oh yeah, we go into classrooms and we just cut the hair off the girls. She was bragging. She wasn't ashamed of it. She's telling me, oh yeah, we have beautiful hair for sale. I said, really? What kind of hair? Where is it from? And she said, it's beautiful, healthy hair from young girls. I said, what do you mean young girls? She said, from teenagers. Teenagers? How old are these teenagers? 14 to 16 years old. I said, 14 to 16 years old. How are you collecting this hair? She said, oh, we have a team of men, and we go into classrooms and we lock the doors and we hold them down. We cut their hair. She wasn't even ashamed. Like, that's normal behavior to her. I said, really? She said, yes, don't worry. We compensate the families afterwards so they don't complain. And she said, so then she asked, are you interested? I said, no, thank you. She said, but it's such healthy hair. These are all young girls. They're poor, so they don't process their hair. It's healthy, unprocessed hair. I said, I'm not interested, thank you. I didn't want to tell her why, because I didn't want her to know not to brag like that to the next person, because I want people to know that they're not getting ethically sourced hair if they're buying from somebody like that. But that's just one example. It happens in prisons. It happens even on the street. Women get attacked for their hair. It happens in religious ceremonies. In certain religions, they're encouraged to cut off their hair to offer as an offering. But then the hair, instead of being offered to their gods, is sold instead on the hair market. At least that way it's not taken with violence. But in prisons it is, in schools it is. Homes are broken into. Girls are stalked. Someone noticed a girl has long, beautiful hair. and they're in the market for that, they'll stalk this young girl as she's walking home from school and break into her home afterward, cut her and her sister's hair, pay the family a little bit of money so that they don't complain. And they're so desperately poor and terrified, they'll buy off the authorities too so they can get away with it. Like, there are terrible stories, things that happen. So that's what's meant when we say hair not ethically sourced. And that's what this label means. This kosher label means, so there are people who are against Indian hair for religious reasons and assume that that label is just to ensure that it's not Indian hair. But the reality is, that's not the only reason for that kosher certification. It's also to ensure that it's ethically sourced. And that's why I only do business with factories that, well, with the one factory, but with a factory that has a kosher certification, and that I verify every so often that that's still active and that they're still actually getting inspected by the authorities that certify them as kosher, because it is very important to me to make sure that the hair I use is ethically sourced, because I don't want any part in that. And there are a lot of countries in the world where slavery, unfortunately, is still legal. And where it's legal to own a human being, it's also legal to cut off that human's hair if you think it looks really nice and you can get a good price for it. So that's also an example of hair that would not be ethically sourced. So bear in mind that if you're buying a cheaper wig and it's cheap enough that it's not likely the hair was ethically sourced, or that it's very likely the hair is not ethically sourced, or even impossible that the hair is ethically sourced, it was probably, it was collected in one of the ways that I just described. Through violence, through violating another woman. And if you're okay with using that to make yourself feel beautiful, then okay, you could save a few $100s and you do you. I personally am not okay with that, so I pay a lot more for my products, and because of that I have to charge more for them also. And I don't profit as much as I would if I were okay with using hair that might possibly not be ethically sourced. But that is something that is very important to me. Another thing that's very important to me is making sure that slave labor was not used in the manufacturing of my wigs, because slavery is legal in China and there are factories that use slave labor. So it's important to me also to make sure that the one I work with is not one of those. And that's that it's hard to find because a lot of them do use, but there are some factories that don't, not just the one. There are multiple ones that don't use slave labor, and I'm working with one of the ones that doesn't. And that's another reason for that kosher certification. So that's very important to me also. But companies that are less choosy about who they work with and where the wigs are coming from are able to get cheaper wigs and sell them for cheaper. So if that's not important to you, you could find cheaper wigs. And you can find a lot of deals on Amazon, Ally, and all those other sites, like those $300, $800 and whatever, those cheaper wigs. But just know that that's why they're so cheap. I thought you should know that. So if you've watched this far, now you do.